The gunshot that pierced the still morning air of Wallace, Colorado in 1876, wasn't meant to kill, but it changed Clara Thompson's life forever. Standing on the porch of her family's modest homestead, she watched as her father crumpled to the ground, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutched his shoulder. The banker's men had come to collect, and they'd made their point. Pa. Clara rushed to her father's side, pressing her handkerchief against the wound as the men mounted their horses. "You've got 2 weeks, Thompson," the lead man called out. 2 weeks to pay what you owe or we take everything." Clara helped her father inside, her mind racing. At 22, she had spent her entire life on this ranch. After her mother's death 3 years prior, it had been just the two of them struggling to keep the place running. The drought had destroyed their crops, and her father's gambling had done the rest. "I'm sorry, Clara," her father whispered as she cleaned his wound. "I've ruined everything your mother and I built." "We'll figure something out, Pa," she assured him, though she had no idea what that might be. The next day, Clara rode into Wallace, a small but growing mining town nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The town had swelled with the discovery of silver, bringing prospectors, merchants, and opportunists of all kinds. She tied her horse outside the general store, smoothing her worn dress before stepping inside. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly shopkeeper, greeted her warmly. "Clara, how's your father doing?" "He's healing," she replied, not mentioning the banker's ultimatum. "I've come to ask if you might need help around the store. I'm looking for work." The old man's face fell. "I'm sorry, child. Business is slow these days. I can barely keep myself afloat." Clara nodded, swallowing her disappointment. She tried the dressmaker next, then the hotel, and finally the schoolhouse. Each place turned her away. Too few customers, too little money, too many workers already. As the afternoon sun beat down, Clara sat on a bench outside the town's only restaurant, exhausted and discouraged. 2 weeks to come up with the money, or they would lose everything. Selling the ranch was not an option. No one would pay enough to cover their debts in such a short time. "Miss Thompson." A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Clara looked up to see Riley Xavier standing before her, hat in hand. She knew of him. Of course, everyone in Wallace knew the Xavier Ranch was the largest and most successful in the county. Riley had taken it over 5 years ago when his father died, turning it from a modest operation into a thriving business. At 28, he was one of the most eligible bachelors in the territory. "Mr. Xavier," she acknowledged, straightening her posture. "I heard about what happened to your father," he said. "Those men work for Harrington's bank. He's been forcing folks off their land all over the county." Clara nodded, wondering why this successful rancher was concerning himself with her family's troubles. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Thompson," Riley continued, his expression unreadable. "A business arrangement, if you will." "What kind of arrangement?" Clara asked cautiously. Riley glanced around the busy street before speaking. "I need a wife, Miss Thompson. My ranch is growing and I need someone to help manage the household. In return, I can pay off your father's debts and ensure you both keep your land." Clara stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You're proposing marriage to me? We barely know each other." "It would be a marriage of convenience," Riley explained. "You would have your own room, of course. I simply need someone to oversee the house staff and occasionally host business associates. Your reputation in town is impeccable, hardworking, honest, educated. You're exactly what I need." "And what do I get from this arrangement besides keeping our land?" Clara asked, finding her voice. "Financial security, a comfortable home, protection." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm not offering romance, Miss Thompson, just practicality." Clara stared at the dust on her boots. Marriage to a virtual stranger, a successful, respected stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. Yet what choice did she have? The bank would take everything, and then what would happen to her father? "I need to think about it," she finally said. Riley nodded. "Of course. I'll call on you tomorrow for your answer." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Clara to contemplate trading her future for her father's security. That evening, Clara explained Riley's proposition to her father as they ate a simple supper. "Absolutely not," James Thompson exclaimed, wincing as the sudden movement jostled his wounded shoulder. "I won't have you sacrificing yourself for my mistakes." "It's not just your mistakes, Pa," Clara reasoned. "The drought hit everyone hard, and it's not such a terrible sacrifice. Riley Xavier is respected in town. His ranch is successful. I'd have a good life." "A life without love," her father countered. Clara sighed. "Love is a luxury we can't afford right now. This is about survival." That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her mother, who had married for love and found happiness despite the hardships. What would she think of Clara marrying for convenience, for pity's sake? By morning, Clara had made her decision. When Riley arrived at midday, she was ready. "I accept your proposal, Mr. Xavier," she said as they stood on the porch. "But I have conditions. My father will stay here on our land. You'll continue to let him work it with help from your men when needed." Riley nodded. "Agreed. And I want everything in writing. The payment of our debts, the arrangement about this property, all of it." A hint of a smile crossed Riley's face. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Thompson. I'll have the papers drawn up immediately." 3 days later, Clara stood in the town's small church wearing her mother's wedding dress, hastily altered by the local seamstress. Only her father, the minister, and 2 witnesses from Riley's ranch attended the ceremony. There were no tears of joy, no passionate kisses. Just a handshake between Riley and her father, a brief touch of lips to seal the vows, and Clara was Mrs. Riley Xavier. That afternoon, Riley took her to his ranch, a sprawling property with a large 2-story house that dwarfed her family's humble cabin. 4 ranch hands worked the corrals, while smoke rose from the bunkhouse where the rest of his men lived. A middle-aged woman named Mrs. Winters served as housekeeper, and she showed Clara to her room, a spacious chamber with a 4-poster bed and a view of the mountains. "Mr. Xavier had this room prepared special for you, madam," Mrs. Winters explained. "Said you was to have the best of everything." Clara ran her fingers over the fine quilt. "It's very nice, thank you. Dinner's at 6 sharp," the housekeeper added before leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. At dinner, Riley was polite but distant, explaining the routine of the ranch and what he expected of her as its mistress. "Mrs. Winters handles the cooking, but she'll need your guidance on menus when we have guests," he explained. "The ledgers for household expenses are in my office. I'd like you to review them weekly." "Of course," Clara replied, trying to sound confident, though she felt overwhelmingly out of place in this grand dining room with its heavy silverware and crystal glasses. "I've arranged for your father's debt to be paid in full tomorrow," Riley continued. "The bank will provide a receipt confirming it's settled." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but what else could she say to the man who had saved her family's legacy, yet expected her to live as a stranger in his home? That night, Clara lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the large house settling. She had traded her freedom for security, her future for her father's. As tears slipped silently down her cheeks, she wondered if she had made the right choice. The next morning, Clara rose early, determined to begin her new role properly. She dressed in one of the simple but well-made dresses Riley had provided, then made her way downstairs. To her surprise, Riley was already at the breakfast table, reading a newspaper. He stood when she entered, pulling out her chair. "Good morning," he said. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you," Clara lied, taking her seat. They ate in silence until Riley folded his newspaper. "I'll be riding to your father's place today to check on him and bring the bank receipt." "Is there anything you'd like me to tell him?" Clara hesitated. "Just that I'm well, and that I hope his shoulder is healing." Riley nodded, studying her for a moment. "Clara, I know this isn't what you dreamed of for your life, but I hope in time you'll find contentment here." Before she could respond, he rose from the table. "I'll be back by supper." Left alone, Clara decided to explore her new home. The house was larger than any she had ever been in, with a formal parlor, a study filled with books, and even a music room with a piano she couldn't play. The kitchen was modern and well-stocked, and Mrs. Winters seemed pleased to show her the pantry and storage rooms. "Mr. Xavier built most of this himself," Mrs. Winters told her as they walked through the house. "His pa had a simple cabin, but after he passed, Mr. Riley started adding on. Said a man should have a proper home if he aims to have a proper family someday." Clara nodded, surprised by this insight into her new husband. "Has he spoken often of wanting a family?" Mrs. Winters shrugged. "Not in so many words. But a man doesn't build a house with 4 bedrooms if he plans to live alone forever." Over the next 2 weeks, Clara settled into a routine. She rose early, reviewed the household accounts, planned meals with Mrs. Winters, and learned about the operations of the ranch. Riley was always polite, always respectful, but he maintained his distance. Each day, he rode out early to work with his men and returned for supper, where they would exchange brief conversations about the day's events before he retired to his study. He never entered her room, never made any demands beyond what they had agreed upon. It was exactly the arrangement they had discussed, yet Clara found herself oddly disappointed by his detachment. One evening, as Clara sat in the parlor mending one of Riley's shirts, she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the window, she saw Riley carrying one of his ranch hands toward the house, the man's leg bloodied. "Clara," Riley called as he entered. "Pete's been thrown from his horse, his leg's pretty torn up." Clara immediately cleared the dining table. "Lay him here, Mrs. Winters. Bring hot water and clean cloths." Having cared for her father and the occasional injured farmhand, Clara was no stranger to treating wounds. She worked efficiently, cleaning the deep gash on Pete's calf and stitching it closed with steady hands. Riley watched her work, handing her supplies as needed. When she finally tied off the last stitch, he nodded appreciatively. "You've done this before," he observed. "My mother taught me," Clara explained. "She said every ranch woman should know how to stitch flesh as well as fabric." For the first time since their marriage, Riley smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Your mother was a wise woman." That night marked a subtle shift in their relationship. At breakfast the next morning, Riley lingered longer than usual, asking Clara about her family and her life before their marriage. She found herself sharing stories of growing up on the ranch, of her mother's gardens and her father's attempts at raising horses. "What about you?" she ventured. "You've built all this yourself, but I know very little about you." Riley seemed surprised by her interest, but began to speak of his childhood, of learning ranching from his father and expanding their holdings after his death. "My mother died when I was 12, he explained. "My father never remarried, said he couldn't find another woman who'd put up with him." He smiled faintly. "I guess I took after him in that respect, never thought I'd marry either." "Until you needed someone to run your household," Clara said, trying to keep the hint of bitterness from her voice. Riley studied her, his expression unreadable. "It wasn't just that, Clara. I could have hired a housekeeper for that. I wanted—" He stopped, then stood abruptly. "I should get to work. The cattle in the north pasture need moving today. Clara watched him go, puzzled by what he'd been about to say. Over the following days, she found Riley making small efforts to be more present. He brought her wildflowers he'd found while riding the property. He asked her opinion on cattle purchases. Once, he even requested that she read aloud from a book while he repaired a saddle in the evening. Something about the sound of her voice, he said, made the work go faster. A month into their marriage, Wallace was preparing for its annual Founders' Day celebration. Clara was surprised when Riley suggested they attend together. "People will expect to see us," he explained. "It would look strange if the largest rancher in the county didn't bring his new wife." Clara agreed, though she felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of facing the town as Mrs. Xavier. She'd avoided town since the wedding, sending Mrs. Winters for supplies. The day of the celebration, Riley presented her with a gift, a new dress of deep blue silk with a matching bonnet. "I had it ordered from Denver," he said, almost shyly. Mrs. Winters helped with the measurements. Clara ran her fingers over the fine fabric. "It's beautiful, thank you." When they arrived in town, Clara was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered conversations their presence inspired. Everyone knew their marriage had been arranged to save her father's property, and she could feel the weight of judgment in many eyes. Mrs. Xavier, the banker's wife, approached, her smile not reaching her eyes. "What a lovely dress! How fortunate you are to have married so advantageously." Before Clara could respond, Riley placed his hand at the small of her back. "I'm the fortunate one, Mrs. Harrington," he said firmly. "My wife brings grace and intelligence to a house that sorely needed both." Throughout the day, Riley stayed close to her side, introducing her proudly to business associates, dancing with her during the evening festivities, and making sure everyone saw them as a united front. Clara was touched by his protectiveness, recognizing that he was shielding her from gossip and establishing her position in the community. As they rode home under the stars, Clara found herself studying her husband's profile in the moonlight. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged way, strong jaw, intelligent eyes, hands calloused from honest work. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "You didn't have to defend me to Mrs. Harrington." Riley glanced at her. "I meant what I said. You've brought something to my home that was missing." After a moment, he added, "I hope someday you'll think of it as your home too." The weeks turned to months, and autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds. Clara's father visited occasionally, delighted to see his daughter running the Xavier household with confidence. He was healing well and managing their homestead with the help of one of Riley's men who rode over daily. Clara found herself settling into her role, not just as a housekeeper but as a true partner in the ranch's operations. Riley began consulting her on business decisions, valuing her practical mind and careful judgment. They fell into a comfortable routine, sharing meals, discussing books in the evenings, and working side by side when the ranch demanded all hands. Yet despite their growing friendship, Riley maintained a respectful distance. He never entered her bedroom, never presumed upon his rights as a husband. Clara told herself this was what she wanted, what they had agreed upon, but she couldn't deny the strange longing she felt when their hands accidentally touched, or when she caught him watching her across the room. One crisp October day, Clara rode out to check on a pregnant mare in the far pasture. The horse had been showing signs of distress, and Riley was away in Denver on business. As she approached the mare's shelter, she was alarmed to see the animal lying on its side, breathing heavily. "Easy, girl," Clara soothed, dismounting quickly. She could see the labor had begun, but something was wrong. The foal was positioned incorrectly. For hours, Clara worked to help the struggling mare, using the knowledge her father had taught her about difficult births. The sun was setting by the time the foal finally emerged, alive but weak. Clara was exhausted, covered in dirt and other things she preferred not to think about, but triumphant. She didn't hear the approaching rider until he was almost upon her. "Clara," Riley dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. "Mrs. Winters said you'd been gone for hours." "I just got back from Denver," and he stopped, taking in the scene, Clara kneeling beside the mare and newborn foal. "You did this yourself?" Clara nodded, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "The foal was breech. I had to turn it." Riley knelt beside her, examining the trembling foal with gentle hands. "This is extraordinary work, Clara. Most seasoned ranchers would have lost them both." "My father raised horses before the drought forced him to sell them," she explained. "He taught me well." Riley helped her to her feet, his hands lingering on her arms. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Do you know that?" In the fading light, his eyes held something Clara hadn't seen before: admiration, yes, but something warmer too. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but he stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should get them both to the stable where it's warmer," he said, his voice rougher than usual. They carefully transported the mare and foal back to the main ranch, working together until both animals were settled comfortably in clean straw with fresh water and feed. Later that night, after Clara had bathed and changed, she found Riley in his study, a glass of whiskey in hand. "I wanted to thank you for coming to find me," she said from the doorway. Riley looked up, his expression troubled. "I should have been here if anything had happened to you out there alone." "But nothing did," Clara assured him, "and now we have a healthy new foal." Riley stood, crossing to where she stood. "Clara, when Mrs. Winters told me you'd been gone since morning, I felt," he shook his head. "I realized how important you've become to me, not just as the mistress of this house, but as—" He trailed off, seeming unable to find the words. Clara's heart quickened. "As what, Riley?" Instead of answering, he reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and touched her cheek. "I never expected to care for you this way," he admitted quietly. "It wasn't part of our arrangement." "No," Clara agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't." For a long moment they stood there, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Riley stepped back, his hand falling away. "You should rest," he said. "It's been a long day." Clara nodded, disappointed yet somehow relieved. Whatever was growing between them, it was fragile, needing time and care like the newborn foal in the stable. As winter settled over Wallace, the Xavier Ranch prepared for the cold months ahead. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, the barn stocked with hay, and the house made ready for the isolation that snow would bring. Clara found herself enjoying the coziness of the evenings, sitting by the fire with Riley, reading or talking as the wind howled outside. Their friendship deepened through these quiet times. Riley shared his dreams for the ranch, the breeding program he wanted to establish, the new techniques for raising healthier cattle. Clara spoke of her mother's herb garden and how she hoped to create something similar come spring. One evening, as a particularly fierce blizzard raged, Riley brought out a chessboard. "My father taught me to play during winters like this," he explained, setting up the pieces. "Do you know the game?" "My mother played," Clara said, taking a seat across from him, "though I was never very good." Riley smiled. "I'll go easy on you." They played late into the night, the game forgotten as they shared stories of their childhoods. Clara described the Christmas when her father had carved her a set of wooden animals, and Riley recalled fishing trips with his father before illness had weakened the older man. "He would have liked you," Riley said, studying the chessboard rather than meeting her eyes. "My father, I mean. He always said I needed someone sensible to balance my stubborn streak." Clara laughed softly. And do I balance your stubborn streak? Riley finally looked up, his expression earnest. You do so much more than that, Clara. You've brought life back to this house, to me. The confession hung in the air between them. Clara felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. I was so angry when I agreed to marry you, she admitted. I felt trapped with no choice but to accept your offer. And now, Riley asked, his voice low, now I'm grateful, Clara said truthfully. Not just for saving our land, but for, she hesitated, for giving me a home where I feel valued, respected. Riley reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You are valued here, Clara, more than you know. The storm's howling seemed to fade into the background as they sat there, hands joined across the forgotten chess game, something new and tender growing between them. Christmas brought a brief respite from winter's isolation. Riley surprised Clara by inviting her father to stay with them for the holiday, and the three of them enjoyed the finest celebration Clara had known in years. Mrs. Winters outdid herself with a feast of roast goose and all the trimmings, and Riley presented both Clara and her father with thoughtful gifts. For Clara, there was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a silver pen. You mentioned wanting to keep records of the garden you'll plant, he explained. This seemed fitting. For her father, Riley had found a fine pocket watch to replace the one he'd had to sell during the worst of their financial troubles. James Thompson was moved to tears by the gift. You've done more than enough for us already, son, he said, clasping Riley's hand. Your family now, Riley replied simply. That night, after her father had retired to the guest room, Clara and Riley sat alone by the fire, enjoying the peaceful glow of the Christmas tree. Thank you for inviting my father, Clara said. It meant the world to him, and to me. Riley nodded. I know you miss him, and he's a good man who's had a hard run of luck. We both have, Clara said, until you came along. Riley turned to face her fully. Clara, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said before we married. She tensed, wondering what confession could bring such seriousness to his expression. I didn't approach you that day in town by chance, he said. I'd been watching you for months. Years, really. Watching me, Clara echoed, confused. Not in a sinister way, Riley hastened to add. I admired you from afar. The way you carried yourself after your mother died, how hard you worked to help your father, your kindness to everyone in town, even when you were struggling. He took a deep breath. When I heard about your father's debt, I saw an opportunity to help you. To have you in my life, even if it wasn't the way I dreamed. Clara stared at him, processing his words. You had feelings for me before. Why didn't you simply court me properly? Riley's laugh held no humor. Look at me, Clara. I'm not good with words or social graces. I'm a rancher who spends more time with cattle than people. What woman would choose such a life willingly? I might have, Clara said softly. The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing at once. Riley reached for her hand, holding it gently. I didn't want your pity, he said. I thought if I offered a business arrangement, your pride could remain intact. But I've come to realize I've been unfair to you, letting you believe I married you solely for practical reasons when the truth is far more selfish. Clara's heart raced as she understood what he was saying. And what is the truth, Riley? He met her eyes directly. The truth is I've been half in love with you since the first time I saw you stand up to Harrington's men 3 years ago, defending your land. I married you hoping someday you might feel something for me beyond gratitude or obligation. I know it was wrong to deceive you. You didn't deceive me, Clara interrupted. You offered me exactly what you promised. A home, security, respect. She squeezed his hand. But you've given me so much more than that, Riley. Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wished, Clara leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and questioning, but it held the promise of deeper feelings. When they parted, Riley looked at her with wonder. "Clara, I know," she said. "But perhaps we could start again, not as a business arrangement, but as a man and woman learning to be husband and wife in truth." Riley's smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and doubt. "I would like that very much." That night, for the first time, Clara fell asleep in her husband's arms, no longer a wife in name only, but a woman beginning to understand the meaning of love. As winter gave way to spring, Clara and Riley's relationship blossomed like the wildflowers covering the Colorado hills. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and needs, building a genuine partnership that strengthened daily. Riley proved to be a considerate and passionate husband, while Clara discovered a depth of feeling she had never expected when she agreed to their arrangement. In April, Clara began her herb garden, carefully planting the seeds she had ordered from a catalog in Denver. Riley built her a sturdy fence to keep out rabbits and constructed raised beds that would be easier for her to tend. "My mother would have loved this," Clara told him as they worked side by side, their hands dirty from the rich soil. "She always said a garden feeds more than the body, it feeds the soul." Riley smiled, watching her arrange the tiny seedlings. "She sounds like a wise woman." "I wish I could have known her. She would have liked you," Clara assured him. "She valued honesty and hard work above all else." As spring progressed, the ranch thrived under their joint care. The foal Clara had helped birth grew strong and spirited, becoming her special project. Riley began teaching her to ride better, as her experience had been limited to the old, gentle mare she'd had at home. "You can't properly help run a cattle ranch without riding well," he explained, adjusting her posture on one of his steadier horses. "Besides, I'd feel better knowing you could handle yourself if you needed to ride out alone." Clara appreciated his concern, but even more, she valued his confidence in her abilities. Unlike many husbands who might try to limit their wives' activities, Riley encouraged her to learn every aspect of the ranch operations, trusting her judgment and respecting her intelligence. By summer, Clara had become an essential part of the ranch's success. She kept meticulous records, helped with the cattle branding, and even negotiated a favorable contract with a buyer from Kansas City who had underestimated the sharp-minded ranch wife. "You're a natural businesswoman," Riley told her proudly after the buyer had left. He never knew what hit him. Clara laughed. He thought he was dealing with a simple country girl who wouldn't understand fair pricing. "His mistake," Riley said, pulling her close. "There's nothing simple about you, Mrs. Xavier." Their happiness seemed complete, yet Clara noticed a shadow occasionally crossing Riley's face when he thought she wasn't looking. At first, she dismissed it as tiredness from the demanding summer work, but as the pattern continued, she grew concerned. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara finally asked, "What's troubling you, Riley? And don't say nothing, I know you better than that now." Riley was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I've been thinking about children." Clara's heart skipped. "Oh, I know we never discussed it," he continued, staring at the distant mountains. "Our arrangement didn't include such things, but lately I've found myself wondering, hoping." He turned to her, vulnerability plain on his face. "Would you want children with me, Clara?" "A family of our own." The question brought tears to Clara's eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. "Yes," she whispered. "I've been hoping for the same thing." The relief on Riley's face was palpable. He gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I love you, Clara Xavier," he said fiercely. "God help me, I love you more than I ever thought possible." It was the first time he had said the words directly, though his actions had been speaking for months. Clara pulled back enough to see his face, her own heart overflowing. "And I love you, Riley Xavier," she responded. "Not out of gratitude or duty, but with my whole heart." Their kiss sealed this new understanding. They were no longer bound by an arrangement of convenience, but by the deepest love, freely given and joyfully received. As summer faded into autumn, Clara began to suspect their wish for a family might be fulfilled sooner than expected. She waited to be certain before sharing her suspicions with Riley, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. By October, there was no doubt. The morning sickness and other signs confirmed what her heart had already known. She planned a special dinner to tell Riley, preparing all his favorite foods with Mrs. Winter's help. "You're glowing like a lantern, Mrs. Xavier," the housekeeper observed with a knowing smile. "I reckon congratulations might be in order soon." Clara blushed, but didn't deny it. "Let's just focus on making this dinner perfect, Mrs. Winters." That evening, as they sat at the dining table, Clara found herself nervous about sharing her news. Would Riley be truly happy, or would he worry about the dangers childbirth could bring? Many men in the West had lost wives to childbed fever or difficult deliveries. "This is wonderful, Clara," Riley said, enjoying the roast beef and apple pie she had prepared. "What's the occasion?" Clara took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you, something important." Riley put down his fork, suddenly alert. "Is everything all right?" Clara reached across the table to take his hand. "Everything is perfect, Riley. I'm going to have a baby, our baby. In the spring." For a moment, Riley sat completely still, his face unreadable. Then, to Clara's astonishment, tears filled his eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" Clara nodded, her own eyes misting. "As sure as I can be. Dr. Martin confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." Riley was around the table in an instant, kneeling beside her chair and gathering her in his arms. "Clara, my love," he murmured against her hair. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado." His joy banished any doubts Clara might have harbored. That night, as they lay together planning for their child's future, Clara marveled at how completely her life had changed in just over a year. From desperation and a marriage of convenience to the deepest love and a family on the way, it seemed almost too perfect. As if reading her thoughts, Riley said, "I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this has all been a dream, that you're not really here loving me, carrying our child." Clara pressed his hand to her still flat stomach. "It's real, Riley, all of it." The coming months brought both joy and challenges. Clara's father was ecstatic about becoming a grandfather, visiting more frequently as her pregnancy progressed. Riley became almost overprotective, insisting she rest more and hiring additional help for the household chores. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Clara protested when he tried to stop her from helping with the spring planting. "Humor me," Riley replied, kissing her forehead. "I just want to keep you both safe." Clara understood his fear. In this untamed land, childbirth remained dangerous despite advances in medicine. Dr. Martin was competent, but he served a large area and might not be available when her time came. Riley insisted on hiring a midwife from Denver to stay with them for the final month, sparing no expense to ensure Clara had the best care possible. As her belly grew, Clara found herself marveling at the miracle of new life. The baby was active, especially at night, kicking and turning as if impatient to join the world. "Strong like his father," Clara commented one evening as Riley felt the movements beneath his palm. "Or stubborn like his mother," Riley countered with a smile. "Either way, this child will be remarkable." In late April, just as the wildflowers were painting the hillsides with color, Clara's labor began. Despite all preparations, it started earlier than expected, catching them off guard. The midwife had arrived just 2 days before, barely settled in when Clara felt the first contractions while working in her herb garden. Riley found her there, leaning against the fence, breathing through the pain. One look at her face told him everything. "It's time," Clara confirmed, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. The next 18 hours tested them both. Clara's labor progressed slowly, the pain intensifying until she thought she might break from it. Riley refused to leave her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow and encouraging her when her strength faltered. "You can do this, my love," he whispered during a particularly difficult moment. "You're the strongest person I know." Dawn was breaking when their son finally entered the world, his lusty cry filling the bedroom where Clara had spent her first night as a reluctant bride, and now welcomed her child as a woman deeply in love. "He's perfect," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "A strong, healthy boy." Clara gazed down at the tiny red face, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it stole her breath. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Riley sat beside them, one arm around Clara, the other hand gently touching his son's dark hair. "He's magnificent," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." They named him James after Clara's father, with the middle name Thomas to honor Riley's father. James Thomas Xavier was welcomed into the community of Wallace with celebration and joy, the first child born to one of the territory's most respected couples. Clara recovered quickly from the birth, her natural strength reasserting itself. By summer, she was back to helping with the ranch, though now with a baby strapped to her chest or napping nearby while she worked. Riley proved to be a devoted father, often carrying little James with him as he supervised the ranch hands, proud to show off his son. "He'll be running this place someday," Riley would say. "Got to learn early." The ranch prospered that year, as if blessed by the arrival of its heir. The cattle fetched good prices at market, the crops yielded a bountiful harvest, and Riley's breeding program produced horses that buyers came from as far as California to purchase. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with James asleep in Clara's arms, Riley said, "I've been thinking about your father." "Oh," Clara shifted the baby to her other shoulder. "What about him?" "He's getting older, and that place of his is a lot of work for one man, even with our help," Riley explained. "I was thinking we might offer to build him a small house here on our property, close enough for him to be part of our daily lives, but with his own space." Clara stared at her husband, touched by his thoughtfulness. "You would do that for him, after already saving his land," Riley shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He's family, Clara. Your family is my family. Besides, James should grow up knowing his grandfather." Clara leaned over to kiss him, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "You are a remarkable man, Riley Xavier. Do you know that?" Riley smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I'm just a man who got luckier than he deserved." The following spring, James Thompson moved into the small but comfortable house Riley built for him near the main ranch house. At 65, he was still spry enough to help with light ranch work and took special delight in caring for his grandson, who was now toddling and getting into everything. Clara's father thrived in this new arrangement, regaining much of the vigor he had lost during their financial struggles. He started a small vegetable garden beside his new home and began teaching little James about plants and animals as soon as the boy could toddle alongside him. "You've given my father a new lease on life," Clara told Riley one evening as they watched the old man showing James how to feed the chickens. "I haven't seen him this happy since before my mother died." Having purpose keeps a man young, Riley observed. And that boy of ours gives him plenty of purpose. As James grew from toddler to child, the Xavier Ranch continued to prosper. Riley's reputation as a fair businessman and skilled rancher spread throughout the territory, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Clara managed the expanding household with grace and efficiency, while also becoming known for her medicinal herb garden, which provided remedies for many in the community when the doctor was unavailable. By 1883, 7 years after their marriage of convenience, Clara and Riley had built a life richer than either could have imagined. James, now 6, was joined by a 4-year-old sister, Emma, and Clara was expecting their 3rd child in the fall. The town of Wallace had grown as well, with a proper school, 2 churches, and even a small library that Clara had helped establish. The silver mine still brought wealth to the region, though everyone knew such resources wouldn't last forever. One autumn afternoon, Clara sat on a blanket beneath an oak tree, watching James and Emma play with the wooden animals Riley had carved for them. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the occasional movements of the child within. Riley joined her, sitting close enough for their shoulders to touch. "The children are growing like weeds," he observed, smiling as Emma tackled her brother, both of them giggling. "They are," Clara agreed. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed since that day you proposed your business arrangement to me in town." Riley took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Do you ever regret it, marrying me the way you did?" Clara turned to study his face, surprised by the question after so many years of happiness. "Regret? How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made?" "But you married me out of necessity," Riley reminded her, "to save your father's land, not for love." Clara's expression softened. "That's true. But you earned my love, Riley. Day by day, with patience and kindness and respect. You never demanded it or assumed it was your right. You simply showed me, through countless small actions, what kind of man you truly are." She leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder as it had for years now. "I may have married you out of pity, thinking I was doing you a favor by agreeing to be your wife in name only. But you've spent every day since proving it was I who received the greater gift." Riley's arm tightened around her. "I love you, Clara Xavier, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "And I love you," she replied simply, the words carrying the weight of their shared history and the promise of their future together. As the sun began its descent behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Clara thought of all the sunsets they had watched together over the years, from those first awkward, silent evenings as strangers bound by contract, to now, sitting contentedly with their children playing nearby and another on the way. She had entered marriage expecting nothing but security, willing to sacrifice her dreams of love for practical considerations. Instead, she had found everything she never knew. She wanted a partner who valued her mind as well as her heart, children who filled their home with laughter, and a love that had grown from the rocky soil of necessity into something beautiful and enduring. Their 3rd child, another boy they named William, was born in October, healthy and strong like his siblings. As Clara held him in the same bedroom where James had been born, with Riley beside her and their older children peering curiously at their new brother, she felt a profound sense of completion. "Our family," Riley said softly, his hand gently stroking William's dark hair. "Our legacy." Clara smiled up at him, tired but radiantly happy. "Built on an arrangement neither of us expected to become love." Riley leaned down to kiss her forehead. "The best kind of love, the kind that grows slowly, takes root deeply, and withstands any storm." Outside, The mountains stood as they had for millennia, witnesses to countless human stories. Within their sheltering presence, the Xavier Ranch would continue to thrive, a testament to a love that began with pity but blossomed through grace into something extraordinary, a love strong enough to build a legacy that would endure long after Clara and Riley were gone. In the years that followed, as their children grew and the century drew to a close, Clara often thought of that desperate young woman who had accepted a marriage proposal from a man she barely knew. How could she have imagined that her sacrifice would lead to such fulfillment? That the arrangement made out of necessity would transform into the greatest blessing of her life? Wallace, Colorado continued to change with the times, the silver eventually playing out as mining towns often did. But the Xavier Ranch remained, adapting and thriving through the seasons of plenty and the inevitable lean years that came with ranching life. Riley and Clara faced each challenge together, their partnership strengthened by the knowledge that what they had built was worth any struggle. By 1896, 20 years after their wedding, James had grown into a thoughtful young man of 19, who shared his father's head for business and his mother's compassionate nature. Emma, at 17, was the scholar of the family, determined to attend college in Denver, a dream her parents fully supported, unusual though it was for a rancher's daughter. William, now 13, was showing remarkable talent with horses, able to gentle even the most spirited colts. Clara's father lived to see all three of his grandchildren grow, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, surrounded by the family that had given his later years such joy. Through it all, the births and deaths, triumphs and setbacks, Riley and Clara's love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. What had begun as a practical arrangement, a marriage entered into with clear-eyed pragmatism rather than romantic illusions, had proven stronger than many unions founded on fleeting passion. "We did it backward," Riley once observed as they celebrated their 20th anniversary with a private picnic on a hillside overlooking their land. "Most folks marry for love and hope. The practical matters sort themselves out." Clara laughed, the sound as clear and joyful as it had been in her youth, though silver now threaded her dark hair. "And we married for practical reasons and hoped love might follow." Riley took her hand, the same strong, gentle hands that had built their home, delivered their children, and held her through life's hardest moments. "I always hoped, Clara. From the first day I hoped." As they looked out over the ranch that had grown from Riley's vision and flourished under their joint care, Clara felt the familiar surge of gratitude that had become part of her daily existence. The frightened young woman who had married a stranger to save her father's land could never have envisioned this life rich in love, purpose, and legacy. "What are you thinking?" Riley asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Clara smiled, leaning into the embrace that still felt like coming home after all these years. "I'm thinking about grace," she said softly. "How you showed it to me from the beginning, never pushing, never demanding, just steadily proving your worth through actions rather than words." "And I'm thinking about pity," Riley replied, a teasing glint in his eyes. "How the woman who married me out of pity became the greatest blessing of my life." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the land in gold and shadow, Clara and Riley Xavier sat together, not as the reluctant bride and practical groom they had once been, but as partners who had learned that the deepest love often grows from unexpected beginnings. Their story of a marriage arranged out of necessity that blossomed into profound love would be passed down through generations of Xaviers. A reminder that love at its most enduring is not always born of passion, but can be built steadily through respect, kindness, and unwavering commitment. In the wild and unforgiving West, where so many dreams withered in the harsh reality of frontier life, Clara and Riley had created something rare and precious, a love story that began with a business proposition, but grew into a legacy of grace that would endure long after they were gone.